In case you're new to my channel, hi, my name is Max. I am an alchemist. Well, I'm about as much an alchemist that one can reasonably be in the modern era. Like, I've never crafted an alchemical recipe, outside of a video game that is. That's because I, like most people, know that there's no scientific basis to alchemical concepts, like transmuting lesser metals into gold or creating the Philosopher's Stone. That said, I've studied a lot of alchemy. Mainly because I just find the old alchemical texts to be so poetic. They're like odes to the fabric of the universe and the structure of the human mind. It's very deep on a psychological level, even if it isn't scientifically sound. On this YouTube channel, I've applied that knowledge to works of fiction that reference alchemy, namely video games such as Silent Hill, the Soulsborne games like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and Elden Ring, and the Xeno series. Over the last couple of years that I've done those videos, I've had people recommend me other works of fiction that reference the alchemical tradition. And of course, the number one recommendation has always been Fullmetal Alchemist. I finished watching Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood for the first time about a week ago. Much like the Berserk manga and anime, there are times where Fullmetal Alchemist will use alchemical imagery and concepts for the sake of aesthetic, where they simply look cool and don't actually mean anything. But then there are times where the series demonstrates such a sophisticated knowledge of the alchemical doctrine that it even blows me away. Do you know that the character known as Father probably has an actual alchemical name? One that is pervasive throughout alchemical doctrine? And I'm not talking about homunculus, by the way. Did you know that the mural of the lion eating the sun in episode 26 references a very important alchemical idea? While I'm sad to say that I won't have time to get to those and other concepts in this video, I am happy to say that I will be addressing all of them as a part of a new series on this channel. I cannot wait to present all the discoveries I've been making about this series, and I hope that by doing so, I can add a deeper level to the collective appreciation we have for this series. So, what will I be addressing with this first video? Mainly, I will be focusing on two characters. Obviously, given the title of this video, one of them will be the character known as Truth. With Truth, I will be demonstrating his relation to a very complex alchemical idea. One which might give greater insight into who Truth is and what its function is. Yes, Truth is basically God, but he's so much more than that. But before I get to that, I will start with the second character of note, Hohenheim. Now, anybody who has a cursory knowledge of FMA lore knows that this character and his name are based off of the real-life alchemist known as Paracelsus the Great from the 16th century. However, the name Paracelsus, just like Hohenheim, were self-given. Paracelsus's real name is Philippus Areolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim, which, low-key, is probably the coolest full name anybody has ever had. Except for maybe Maximus Decimus Meridius. As we know from episode 40 of the anime, Hohenheim gets his name from Father, aka the Dwarf in the Flask, aka Homunculus. FMA's Hohenheim was simply known as Slave 23 before he took on the name Hohenheim, and even before he settled on that, the dwarf suggested he name himself Theophrastus Bombastus. But as far as relations between Paracelsus and the anime, barely anybody has made any connection beyond their names. Just like with real-life alchemy, the alchemy in FMA is largely based around the concepts invented by Paracelsus. I will start off with a few of the basic ones. If any of you watched my videos on the Soulsborne games, you might be familiar with the Paracelsian concept of the Tria Prima, or three primes. To him, every aspect of the universe could be boiled down to three compounds: sulfur, salt, and mercury. These three primes were the product of the four classical elements, which are also found in every aspect of nature. In regards to human beings, these three primes correspond to the human soul, body, and mind/spirit. Regarding Brotherhood, the three primes are referenced in the aforementioned episode 26, when Edward, Ling, and Envy were in the infinite bowels of gluttony. When interpreting the remains of a destroyed mural from the land of Xerxes, Edward points out that the sun represents the soul, the moon represents the mind, and the tablet itself represents the body. But here's where things get tricky. See, alchemy isn't a consistent doctrine. You have to find patterns across various alchemical texts in order to develop a canonical interpretation. In regards to the sun and the moon, while they can symbolize the human soul/sulfur and mind/Mercury, they are more often associated with gold and silver. Does this mean one is right and one is wrong? Or are both right? The simplest answer I can provide to these questions is as follows. The values and meaning that we project onto chemical compounds is subjective. This is the primary reason why alchemy isn't a feasible form of science. Instead, alchemy is a subjective philosophy, and the viability of an alchemic interpretation varies depending on consensus. In regards to the sun, the consensus is more that it represents gold, but it can also represent sulfur, soul, and as Edward points out in episode 26, the Philosopher's Stone itself. Before we move on to truth, I will point out two other minor contributions made by Paracelsus. On the back of Colonel Mustang's glove, we see a symbol with two distinguishing features. One is the flame, which obviously parallels Mustang's status as the flame alchemist, and the other is the salamander. For millennia preceding Paracelsus, salamanders have had an association with fire. While there is no definitive explanation for this, there is a widely accepted interpretation. Salamanders tend to hibernate inside or under wooden logs. When those logs were lit on fire by humans for warmth, obviously salamanders would come flying out of them, thus the association. While this association was not made by Paracelsus, he did incorporate it into the burgeoning alchemical doctrine. In his mind, the four elements had four representative beings, four elementals. Water had nymphs, air had sylphs, earth had pygmies, and fire had salamanders. In short, having a salamander on Mustang's glove makes sense and pays tribute to Paracelsus. The final minor contribution is the integration of the microcosm/macrocosm theory. For those who do not know, the microcosm-macrocosm theory posits two structural similarities, one between the human body and the universe, and the other between the human soul and God. As above, so below. For example, what Edward said about the correspondence of the human soul, mind, and body to the sun, moon, and space reflects that same theory. This concept is also referenced by the character Izumi, when she asks young Edward and Alphonse to contemplate the meaning of the phrase, "one is all and all is one." Replacing the word one with microcosm and all with macrocosm would not change anything about the meaning of the initial statement. Same if you were to change one to below and all to above. Once again, this was not Paracelsus's theory. It's a hermetic concept that goes all the way back to the ancient Greeks. But alchemists thank Paracelsus for making it a mainstream aspect of the alchemical doctrine. There is one other spot where the microcosm-macrocosm theory shows up in the series. That's with the character of Truth. To repeat what I said before, anybody could insinuate for themselves that Truth is basically God in the series, but nobody seems to have noticed the way the series makes use of the alchemical conceptions of God, of which the microcosm-macrocosm dichotomy is only one version. By looking into Paracelsus's works and his conceptions of God, I found some striking parallels to not only the character of Truth, but a couple of other things that almost made me fall out of my chair. Before I explain these things, just know that the alchemical conception of God is very complicated. Though I will explain it slowly, step by step, just be warned that you might want to increase your attention just a little bit. So, one thing that we know for certain about Truth comes from the creator of the original manga, Hiromu Arawaka. She said that Truth was somewhat a hollow version of oneself, as a sort of internal god or conscience. If you have ever heard the religious idea that humans are made in the image of God, Arakawa's statement reflects that idea. It also reflects the microcosm-macrocosm idea, in that all, or God, is one, or you. But it's not just you, it's everything, which is why the dwarf in the flask has a god version of himself just as Edward does, and just as Colonel Mustang does. It is all forms, but it is also one form. Again, though the macrocosm-microcosm idea is not really Paracelsus's, he does have an idea that is unique to him that stands alongside the other idea with equal applicability. That is the light of nature. In every aspect of nature, in every body, there exists an inner light. Paracelsus referred to this light by many names: astrum, iliaster, protoplast, and most importantly, the filius philosophorum, which, translated from Latin, means philosopher's son. Throughout one's life, one interacts with this inner light in the same way one consults their own mind or conscience, in the hopes that we might achieve an intuitive apprehension of the facts, or a spiritual illumination. That light enlightens man as to the workings of nature and gives him an understanding of natural things. This inner light resides in every human, but it bears a special relation to the alchemist. Within the astrum is the quote-unquote medicine. When Paracelsus says that the medicine is found in the astrum, we read in the same treatise that in man, who is made in the image of God, can be found the cause and the medicine. This medicine, as Dr. Marco refers to it in episode 6, is the sage's stone, the grand elixir, the celestial stone, the red tincture, and the fifth element. Quickly, I would like to give special note to the title The Fifth Element, and not because of the movie. The Fifth Element references one of the other titles for the inner light that I mentioned before, the Iliaster. The Philosopher's Stone and the Philosopher's Son are perfect unions of the four elements, and what holds those four elements together is the fifth element that is produced from their union, the Iliaster, the balsam, the quinta essentia, which translated to English means fifth essence. What this all demonstrates is that the Iliaster, the astrum, the Philosopher's Son, the Philosopher's Stone, and the light of nature are all synonymous with the character truth. They are all the same thing. It was Edward's relationship to his astrum, to truth, that produced the illumination, the wisdom he achieved at the end of the series, that he does not need alchemy when he has his family and friends. And it was through truth that he was able to produce the medicine he craved, the recovery of his and his brother's bodies. If this is not enough to convince you, allow me to introduce one last title that Paracelsus used to describe the Filius Philosophorum. This is the part where I'm going to blow all of your minds, so pay attention. That final title is the Primordial Man. Now, the reason why Paracelsus gives this name to the light of nature is because he saw a connection between the concept he came up with and the doctrine of the Primordial Man from Jewish Kabbalah. If you're a regular viewer of my channel, you will have no doubt heard me reference the name of the Kabbalah's Primordial Man. His name is Adam Kadmon. Quote, just as the wisdom of the Kabbalah coincided with the sapientia, the wisdom of alchemy, so the figure of Adam Kadmon was identified with the Filius Philosophorum. For Paracelsus, the Primordial Man was identical with the astrum. This is relevant to FMA in two ways. First, the structure of Adam Kadmon's body mirrors the Sephiroth in Kabbalah. The Sephiroth was produced when God's light shone out into the void at the beginning of time. The light gathered into 10 vessels, and those 10 vessels made up the body of Adam Kadmon. 7 of those vessels shattered because they could not contain the light. The shattered vessels and the light that contained them were what created our universe. The light from those vessels is the Paracelsian inner light, the one that exists in all of us. It is what connects us to the Primordial Man, to Adam Kadmon. If you recall, the Sephiroth is depicted on Edward's Gate of Truth, albeit in a different form. By the way, this illustration was made by another alchemist of note named Robert Fludd. Oh, and who was Robert Fludd a student of? Yeah, Paracelsus. But that's not the most mind-blowing part. Here's a little extra tidbit for all you Neon Genesis Evangelion fans. Recall episodes 60 and 61 from Brotherhood. Remember when all the souls of Amestris united within the body of the Father and then he tried to assimilate God? Did that remind you at any point of the union of all the souls of the world in the End of Evangelion movie? In case you forgot, the Sephirotic tree shows up at about 50 minutes into that movie. Oh, and the giant man and woman joined at the hip? That was Adam Kadmon. If you want to see definitive proof of that, watch my video on Neon Genesis Evangelion. I will link to that in the description box below. This has been just a taste of the things I've noticed regarding Fullmetal Alchemist's connections to real-life alchemy. There will be so much more to come, so make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on those future videos. Also, hit that like button, by the way, if, in fact, you do believe in the law of equivalent exchange. You know, I give you entertainment, you give me a like, pretty please. Finally, if you like this kind of in-depth analysis and want to help ensure its continued production, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I will leave a link to Patreon in the description box below. Thanks for watching, and until next time, just remember, as always, to stay yellow. Bye-bye.